Hey Goblin, you've been really practicing those war drums.
I'll bring the generic goblin noise!
Hey gang, and welcome back. Just so you know, you can use the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, one word, at flipsidegaming.com to get 10% off orders $10 or more. You can also use the promo code at Original Magic Art on everything except for paintings. And finally, you can use the code at mtg.multizone.ca to get 10% off of your orders of singles. Using the code will help you save some money and help out the channel at the same time. Just thought you might want to know, Flipside Gaming is doing another giveaway, this time for a box of Modern Horizons. From May 13th until June 16th, if you place an order of $10 or more, you'll be entered to win. It's one entry per person, so good luck and have fun. Because you all demanded it, I moved the sun, the stars, the sky, and I spent like 4 minutes at Multizone looking for someone with a feather deck. This week we have 3 new friends and 1 old friend and some brand new commanders. First up, we have Max playing the bashful and bashing Bruna, and he keeps an island, a plains, a curator's ward, a rogue's passage, SRAM, Senior Artificer, Sage's Reverie, and Swiftfoot Boots. We have the land-loving Lord Windgrace, played by Seb, keeping a forest, Cabal Coffers, Farseek, Spoils of Victory, Rakdos Signet, Golgari Signet, and Carpet of Flowers. Joey is playing the fearsome flying Feather, and he keeps a Mind Stone, 2 mountains, a plains, Mirrorwing Dragon, Sunforger, and Inspiring Vantage. And last but not least, Jameson is playing Yuriko because I can't think of anything alliterative to say about it, and he keeps an archetype of imagination, stolen identity, throat slitter, chromatic lantern, stronic resonator, swamp, and sunken hollow. Max wins the die roll and starts us off. Max plays an island and passes. Joey plays an inspiring vantage, passing to Seb. Seb plays a forest, and he casts a carpet of flowers before passing. Jameson plays a swamp, and passes. Max plays a city of clouds, and he pays 2 to cast SRAM before passing to Joey. Joey plays a plains, and he casts a Mind Stone. Seb gains 1 mana in his main phase from the carpet of flowers targeting Max, and he plays a second forest. He uses the mana to cast Spoils of Victory, and he passes while searching for a land. Jameson plays a tap Sunken Hollow, passing. Max plays a tap Mirrored Landscape, and then pays 2 to cast a Swiftfoot Boots. He gets to draw from casting the equipment thanks to SRAM, and he passes to Joey. Joey plays a Clifftop Retreat, tapping all of his colored mana sources to help cast Feather before passing to Seb. Sebastien gains 1 from his Carpet trigger in his main phase, and he plays a Cabal Coffers as his land for turn. He uses the 1 floating and a forest to cast a Rakdos Signet, and then uses the Signet to cast a Golgari Signet. He then activates the Golgari Signet to cast Farseek, searching for a land, and passing. Jameson draws and casts Strionic Resonator. He has no land to play, and he passes to Max. Max plays a Rogue's Passage, and pays 2 for an Azorius Signet. He then activates the Signet to sacrifice the landscape, and goes to find some matching basics while passing to Joey. Joey plays a mountain and pays 3 mana to cast a Sunforger. Moving to combat, Feather hits Max for 3 commander damage, and Joey then passes. Seb gains 3 mana in his main phase, targeting Max with his Carpet trigger, and is easily able to cast Lord Windgrace using only the mana he gets from the Carpet and his Signets. He then uptakes Lord Windgrace, discarding a land and drawing 2. We then see an Urborg hit the field, and he's gained even more mana than he had before, and he passes turn. Jameson draws for turn, and is forced to discard, passing. Max plays a plains and brings out Bruna. He equips her with the Swiftfoot Boots, and he heads to combat. He swings the Angel Commander to the rival Angel player, and Bruna's ability triggers. Max gets to put out the Sage's Reverie, the Curator's Ward, and the Ethereal Armor, drawing 3 cards from the Reverie hitting the field and seeing the other enchantments. The end result is Joey getting hit for 11 commander damage, and Max then passes. Joey plays a mountain and casts Magnetic Theft to target his Sunforger and his Feather. He gets to exile the spell and return it at the end of his turn. Joey then activates the Sunforger, detaching it from Feather and going to find a Return to Dust. He casts it, and as it's still in his main phase, gets to exile 2 enchantments or artifacts. He hits Max's Ethereal Armor and Curator's Ward. Joey then passes, returning the Magnetic Theft to his hand at the end of turn. Seb gains 3 mana from the carpet triggers and activates Lord Windgrace in his main phase, dumping a swamp to draw 2 cards. He activates his Cabal Coffers with the mana, and then his signets to have an unnecessarily large amount of mana to cast Hull Breach. He blows up Max's Swiftfoot Boots and Sage's Reverie. Seb then casts Decimate and targets the Carpet of Flowers, Bruna, Rogue's Passage, and Sunforger. The spell resolves and blows up those permanents. Jameson draws, discards, and passes. Max plays a Plains for his turn, and he casts a Dreamstone Hedron in his main phase. He taps it to cast Lightning Greaves, which lets him draw a card with SRAM. Max then equips SRAM with the boots, and moves through his steps. At the end of one of them, before the end step, Joe casts Balduvian Rage on Feather, exiling it and returning it to his hand at the end of turn, and getting a draw trigger on his upkeep. Joey draws on his upkeep, and for turn, and plays a mountain for his land. He pays 5 to cast a Mirrorwing Dragon, which seems kinda nutty in this deck. Seb plays a mountain for turn, and activates his signets and then his coffers to float a good chunk of mana. He puts Pernicious Deed onto the stack, which Max quickly stops with a counterspell. Seb then upticks Lord Windgrace, discarding a forest to draw 2 cards. He casts a Chromatic Lantern with his floating mana, and he passes to Jameson. Jameson draws and discards, not really in the game at this point sadly. Max plays an island and has enough to recast Bruna in his main phase. He moves to equip the Greaves onto Bruna, and Seb and Joey discuss if they want this to happen. Max says he won't attack Seb this round, and with that, Seb lets the equip resolve. Max then casts Frantic Search, drawing 2 cards, discarding 2 cards, and untapping 3 lands. Moving to the beginning of his combat step, Joey uses Magnetic Theft, targeting Feather and Max's Lightning Greaves to basically deny Bruna the attack step. Not able to attack with his commander, Max passes through combat and then re-equips the Greaves onto Bruna in his second main phase. Joey draws and plays a Boros Locket in his main phase, passing to Seb. Seb draws for turn and activates his Signets and Cabal Coffers again. He uses Lord Windgrace's ultimate and targets Feather, the Mirrorwing Dragon, SRAM, the Dreamstone Hedron, the Azorius Signet, and the Mind Stone. With the targets on the stack, Joey uses Magnetic Theft to steal the boots again and put them onto Feather, and he uses a Graceful Reprieve to save his dragon. The spells target all of his creatures, I should note, and Windgrace blows up basically some mana rocks and gains Seb some Cat Warriors as a result. Seb then recasts his commander with some of his floating mana, and he upticks discarding City of Brass to draw 2 cards. We then see a Colony Heart expedition hit the field, and Seb casts Harrow, sacrificing a forest to go and find 2 untapped basics, and puts 2 quest counters on his expedition. Responding to the quest counters trigger, Joey casts the Balduvian Rage again and targets his Mirrorwing. He can't target Feather because of the Greaves, so he'll only get to draw 1 on Jameson's upkeep. Seb then passes, and Joey gets all of his spells back and draws on Jameson's upkeep. Jameson draws, plays a Swamp, and casts Chromatic Lantern before passing to Max. Max starts his main phase off by re-equipping Lightning Greaves. Responding to his own trigger, Max then casts Return to Dust. This prompts Seb to retaliate and uses Beast Within to take out Bruna. Max gets a Beast token, gears it up with the Greaves, and casts Soul Ring. He then drops Smothering Tithe and moves to combat. Joey once again uses the Balduvian Rage, making a copy for each of his creatures, and gets 2 delayed draw triggers for the upkeep, and Max then passes. Joey basically draws 3 for turn, paying nothing for the Smothering Tithe and letting Max gain 3 treasure tokens. He casts an Electrostatic Field in his main phase and passes to Seb. Seb pays the 2 to deny Max treasure, and downtakes Lord Windgrace to return 2 lands from his graveyard to the field. He plays a forest for turn and passes to Jameson. At the end of his second main phase, Joey once again uses the Balduvian Rage, but this time gets 3 copies of it and deals 1 damage to all of his opponents from the field triggering. He then gets to put it to hand at the end of turn. Jameson draws and Joey draws 3, giving Max 4 more treasure tokens. Jameson then drops a Scroll Rack to hopefully get him some lands, and he activates it, setting aside 5 cards from his hand and puts that many to hand. Jameson then plays an island and passes. We see the old Balduvian Rage trick once more from Joey, and it deals 1 to all of his opponents thanks again to the electrostatic field. Joey draws 3 cards on Max's upkeep, and Max gains 3 more treasures. Before leaving the upkeep phase though, Joey's happy to use his newly drawn card, Wear and Tear, to blow up Smothering Tithe. Max then draws for turn, and sacrifices 10 treasures to help recast Bruna. He then equips the Greaves onto Bruna, and it surprisingly resolves. Moving to combat, Max swings Bruna at Lord Windgrace and brings back the Sage's Reverie, attaching it to Bruna in one of those weird instances where an ability can get around Shroud. It's true, Google it. He draws as it enters, and then Lord Windgrace takes 6. Max then plays a Plains, and we see the Rage trick again, with Joey's opponents losing 1. Joey draws another 3 from his triggers, and 1 for turn. He plays a Plains as a land drop, and he brings out Zata because more copies is better. Joey then discards down to 7, and in the meantime, Seb casts Vampiric Tutor to go and find a card, losing 2 life. Seb draws the card he found for turn, and immediately taps all of his mana sources. It's going to be an X spell, and Torment of Hailfire where X is 19 hits the stack. Jameson can't stop enough triggers, and dies, while Max is forced to discard most of his hand and sacrifice enough permanents. Joey casts Shelter, targeting his Mirror-Winged Dragon, and he gives his board pro-black and draws 4 cards. Between discarding and sacrificing most of his board, Joey is also able to live, dropping down to a modest 17. Moving to combat, Seb then swings his Cat Warrior army at Joey, who blocks 2 of them with Feather and Dragon, taking 8 damage. And with nothing else, Seb passes. Max draws and casts Expedition Map, paying the 2 to sacrifice it, and goes to find a land. He grabs a Reliquary Tower because he has just so many cards in hand, and plays it for his turn. During Max's second main phase, Joey once again uses the Balduvian Rage, and gets 2 delayed triggers to draw on his upkeep. Joey draws his 2 from the delayed trigger, and for turn, he plays a Reliquary Tower, and pays 4 to cast Aetherflux Reservoir. We then see a Cold Steel Heart hit the field, coming in tapped, and Joey names red with it, while gaining 2 life from the reservoir. He then passes. Seb activates his coffers after drawing for turn, and makes 11 black mana. He casts Lord Windgrace, and not another X spell, which Max and Joey are thankful for. He upticks the Walker to discard a card, and draws a card. He then casts what he drew, Skyshroud Claim, and goes to grab 2 Force from his library. Seb then swings his remaining cats at Joey, who blocks 2 of them and only takes 4. Before leaving combat, Joey casts Balduvian Rage, gaining 2 draws as we move to Max's turn on his upkeep, and gaining 1 life. Max counts up his lands and plays a Plains, tapping enough to recast Bruna. Joey does his Balduvian Rage trick again, setting up more draws and gaining 1 more life. Joey plays a Plains for turn and casts Commander's Sphere, gaining 1 life. He casts Shelter, drawing 2 cards again and gaining 2 more life. We then see Balduvian Rage put 2 more delayed triggers into the game, and Joey gains 3 life still. He then passes, putting the spells back to hand at the end of turn, and drawing 2 on Seb's upkeep. Seb upticks Lord Windgrace, discarding a mountain and drawing 2. Joey responds by casting Shelter, gaining 1 more life, and giving his creatures protection from black. This gives Seb the go-ahead to cast his Savage Twister, where X is 5. Responding to the spell, Joey casts Guided Strike, drawing 2 as the spell gets copied onto all of his creatures, and gaining 2 life. Seb continues onward while Joey sees if he can save his board, and casts an Oracle of Moldiah, while Joey has his creatures become red and gain haste with a Crimson Wisp, gaining 2 more cards and gaining 3 life. We then see the Desperation and the Superstar card from the deck, Balduvian Rage, come out, and Joey gains 4 life and gains 2 delayed draw triggers to go off on Max's turn. The spell unfortunately wipes the board, and Seb then plays an Exotic Orchard off the top and reveals an Explosive Vegetation, and he passes to Max. Max draws, and Joey draws 2 on Max's upkeep. Max then casts a Gilded Lotus, and passes. Joey recasts Feather, with there being some confusion as to how much she costs. I think he overpays, but he does gain 1 life from the reservoir. He then casts a Star Compass, gaining 2 more life, and passes. Seb draws, and plays a forest off the top. He upticks Lord Windgrace, discarding Explosive Vegetations and drawing the Reclamation Sage, which he casts. It enters, and the destroyed target goes in the reservoir. Joey then cycles through his 1-drop spells, gaining 6 life total, drawing 2 immediately, and gaining 1 delayed draw trigger, and the reservoir then goes to the graveyard. Seb also plays a tapped Dakmor Salvage off the top of his library, and reveals a Maelstrom Pulse. Joey draws on Max's upkeep, and Max draws for turn. He pays 12 mana to recast Bruna in his main phase, and passes. Joey draws for turn and counts up his mana. He isn't sure who's more of a threat, Seb with his mana and board state, or Max with Bruna having already dealt 11 damage to him. Joey decides he's more likely to die to Max, and moves to combat, swinging Feather at him. Joey casts Brute Force, Brute Strength, and Guided Strike, drawing a card as the strike resolves, and then a Defiant Strike, drawing again. We then see a Shelter, granting Feather protection from blue, and Joey draws one more. Max then takes enough damage to die several times over, and reveals that he would have been able to do a pretty decent swing back, but it would have only put Joey to 20 commander damage, lacking that critical 1 extra point. Joey then casts a Monastery Mentor in his second main phase, and passes. Seb draws and reveals a Burgeoning off the top. He downticks Lord Windgrace and targets every non-land permanent that Joey has. With the ability on the stack, Joey uses Shelter to give Feather protection from red, and gains a Monastery Mentor trigger to make a Monk token and a Prowess trigger. He draws and casts Defiant Strike, drawing another card and gaining another Monk. Joey then sacrifices the Commander Sphere to draw a card, and the rest of the board gets destroyed except for Feather and the Monk tokens. With the ability resolving, Seb then moves to cast Maelstrom Pulse on Feather, which Joey still let happen. Seb then reactivates his Cabal Coffers and recasts Lord Windgrace. He downticks the Walker to put lands from the graveyard onto the field, and he moves to combat. Seb swings the Reclamation Sage at Joey, who just takes the hit for 2. Joey draws and casts Soul Ring. He plays a Plains for his land for turn, and brings back Feather in his main phase. He casts a Crimson Wisps, targeting Feather, and she gains haste and draws Joey a card. Joey then uses Path to Exile to get rid of Seb's Oracle of Moldiah, and Seb grabs a forest, and Joey passes. Seb draws for turn, and activates Cabal Coffers. He uses some of his many floating manas to cast Harmonize, drawing 3. Seb then upticks Lord Windgrace, discarding Thespian Stage, and digging further into his library for an answer. Seb then has a Zendikar Incarnate join the party, and he swings his Cat Warriors and the Reclamation Sage at Joey. Joey blocks one of the warriors with Feather, and then takes 12. Sebastian then passes, and Joey opts to not cast his Balduvian Rage for the first time since I can pretty much remember. Joey draws and counts up his mana. He recasts Brute Force on Feather, pumping his commander, and pumping his Monk tokens because of their prowess triggers. Brute Strength then pumps Feather further, and the monks gain another +1/+1 until end of turn. He then gives Feather Double Strike and Trample with Timur Battle Rage, and pumps her again with Defiant Strike, drawing a card as it resolves. Guided Strike then pumps Feather to lethal on connecting, and Joey swings his board at Seb to win the game. Game review time. So I think there were a few misplays on Joey's part this game, but I can't really blame him because he'd basically just sleeved the deck recently, and we just picked up a copy of Feather for him before this video was filmed. That being said, I think Feather is a very resilient and interesting Boros commander, and I'd love to see more of her. I think Aetherflux Reservoir does a fantastic job in the deck with all of the 1-drop spells, and he gained a ton of life, and I could see it being a great finisher for the deck. Unfortunately, not everyone had a great game this game, and Jameson really didn't have anything, even though he kept a pretty decent opener. He was a little bit land light, but all he needed was one more, and he would have been able to get 4 mana, and probably a creature, and then get Yuriko going. Unfortunately, as we saw, that didn't really happen, and even when he started getting things like Scroll Rack to help him smooth out his draws, it was a little bit too late. I think Seb's probably one of the strongest showings for Lord Windgrace on the channel so far, and the deck did so much and had so much mana. I will say that after seeing the ultimate twice in one game, that it's kind of a bit underwhelming, and considering you only get 6 2/2 Cat Warrior tokens, only having Forest Walk on them was unfortunate. I think Max would have had a very different game if it hadn't been for the fact that Joey and Seb had basically teamed up on him to prevent him from attacking more than that first time. Bruna is a fantastic Voltron commander, and I love how even if the ores are in the graveyard, you always have to worry about her. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/mtgmudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/mtgmudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.